They laughed at him, called him weak, said he would never make it. But what happens when the one they tried to break refuses to fall? This is not just a story of pain. It's a storm, a rise from the ashes so powerful, it silences every voice that ever doubted him. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might just change how you face your darkest days. The rain was cold, not the kind that made you smile, but the kind that felt like needles on your skin. He stood there, soaked. Mud clung to his shoes. The air smelled like wet concrete and bitter regret. They had all laughed, said he would never make it. Their voices still echoed in his mind. Too weak, too slow, not good enough. Every word carved deeper than the last. But he said nothing. He just clenched his fists. His heart thumped like war drums, each beat louder than the storm, each breath sharper than the wind. He looked up. The sky was dark, heavy with clouds, but in his eyes, fire. He remembered the day they turned their backs, the day they pointed fingers, the day they made him feel small. His stomach twisted, his hands shook, but he stood tall. Pain raced through his chest, not from the cold, but from the weight of every doubt they planted in him. He could feel it, the fire rising, the silence before the roar. He whispered to himself, "I will not break. I will not bend." The ground beneath him trembled, not from the thunder, but from the power building inside him. His eyes burned, his jaw locked tight, and his soul unchained. They thought he would fall. They thought he would run. They thought they had buried him. But he was a seed, buried in dirt, ready to rise. Every failure, every insult, every scar became fuel, became fire, became fury. He did not scream. He did not cry. He simply moved forward. One step, then another, and with each step, the voices faded. The doubt crumbled. They watched in silence, eyes wide, mouths shut. He did not look back. He did not need to. Their silence said it all. Because in that moment, he did what they never expected. He stood in the storm and proved them all wrong. His heartbeat pounded like thunder. His breath cut through the air like blades. The world grew still around him. He remembered the time they locked the door on him, the time they laughed while he cried behind it, the time they said his dreams were too big. He touched the scar on his knuckle, the one from punching the wall that night, when no one heard him. But the wall heard, and the wall cracked. Just like the limits they tried to set, he stepped into the fire, not to burn, but to become it. And the fire, it welcomed him, because it knew he was not there to survive. He was there to rise, to conquer, to make every breath they wasted doubting him a breath they would regret, a breath they would wish they had saved. He walked through the city streets, drenched, but not defeated. Neon lights flickered in the puddles beneath his feet, casting broken colors across the concrete. Every step echoed, not just in the alleyway, but in his bones, in the depths of his soul where their words had once lived like poison. The same streets where they whispered behind his back now trembled under his stride. He felt the weight of the night pressing on his shoulders, but he carried something heavier, the memory of being told he was not enough. His fingers curled into fists, not to strike, but to remind himself that his hands were built to build, to shape his destiny, not to be shaped by others. A car passed, its headlights slicing through the darkness. For a moment he was blinded, but he had learned to see with more than his eyes. He had learned to see with instinct, with purpose, with pain sharpened into clarity. Every failure replayed in his mind, not to haunt him, but to fuel him. The missed chances, the nights without sleep, the days when his body screamed for rest, but his soul demanded more. He had lived through storms that others would not even step into. He walked past the old school where they used to mock his voice. Too soft, too strange. He remembered standing in front of the class, voice cracking, heart racing, as they laughed like wolves. But now he smiled, because that same voice, once trembled, now thundered. He passed a cafe where he had once applied for a job and was told he was not the right fit. Not smart enough, not experienced enough. He had walked out humiliated, empty-handed, and silent. But now his pockets were full, not with coins, but with courage. The world had mistaken his quiet for weakness. They did not know that silence can be strength, that those who listen learn, that those who fall rise higher. His breath misted in the cold night air, each exhale a release of every chain they ever wrapped around him. He could still hear them, the teachers who said he lacked focus, the friends who left when the road got rough, the family members who shook their heads, disappointed. They tried to write his story before he even picked up the pen, but he tore those pages, one by one. He rewrote the chapters with blood, sweat, and raw, relentless will. He remembered one night, alone in a tiny room, light bulb flickering, fridge empty, heart shattered. He had nothing but a notebook and a dream, and even that dream felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. But he wrote anyway, line after line, tear after tear, until the words turned into a weapon. Now, every street lamp he passed lit up like a spotlight, not because they saw him, but because he was ready to be seen, truly seen, not as the underdog, not as the outsider, but as the force he had become. He remembered the job interviews, where they smiled politely before rejecting him. He remembered the girls who chose someone louder, the coaches who benched him, the clients who walked away. They all added bricks to the wall they thought would contain him. But he used those bricks to build a staircase, step by step, scar by scar, until he stood higher than anyone expected. There were nights he screamed into his pillow, so no one would hear. Nights when his dreams chased him like monsters, when the mirror showed a face he did not recognize. But he kept moving, because something inside him refused to die. Now, as he moved through the streets, everything felt different. The same roads that once felt endless now curled beneath his feet, like trails he commanded. The fear that once paralyzed him now stood behind him, watching in awe. He stopped at the park bench where he used to sit alone, headphones in, pretending to not care. He used to come there to hide, to escape. But now he sat, not to hide but to rest, not to escape but to reflect. The city hummed around him. The world moved, unaware of the storm it had helped create. He was no longer asking for a chance. He was claiming his place. A boy once broken by words had become a man built from defiance. He no longer feared rejection. He had mastered it, transformed it. He wore his scars like armor, not as decoration, but declaration. He stood again, looked out over the skyline. Lights blinked like stars, each one a reminder. He had made it through the darkness, not untouched, but undefeated. They had tried to bury him in silence, in doubt, in shame. But they forgot. Silence can grow strength. Doubt can spark fire. And shame, when embraced, becomes unshakable power. He walked again. Not faster, not slower, but stronger. Because now he walked with purpose, with history, with proof. Proof that you can be laughed at and still rise. Proof that you can be underestimated and still lead. Proof that you can be broken and still become whole. He was not their version of success. He was not polished or perfect. He was real, raw, relentless. And that is what scared them. That he did not need their approval. That he did not fit their mold. That he shattered it. The city pulsed. His veins did too. Because he was alive, awake, and on fire. They had called him a dreamer. But dreams do not fold under pressure. They explode. And now he was the explosion, the answer to every doubt, the living proof that they were wrong. All of them. He did not say it. He did not need to. Because every step forward shouted it louder than any voice ever could. He had proven them all wrong. And he was just getting started. He turned the corner, leaving the park behind, and entered a street he once feared. It was the place where he had been humiliated, where laughter followed him like a shadow. But tonight, the shadow belonged to him. He was not hiding from it anymore. He was walking ahead of it, owning it. There was power in returning to the places where pain was born, not to relive the past, but to conquer it. The shops were closing. Metal shutters rolled down with a clatter like falling gates. Once, those sounds meant the end of another hopeless day. But now they sounded like applause. The night could not silence him anymore. He was louder than it. A dog barked from a distance. A bus hissed to a stop and pulled away. Everything was alive. but nothing felt more alive than the fire in his chest. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The first letter of rejection he ever received. The ink was faded, the corners torn. He had kept it all these years, not as a wound, but as a reminder. He opened it slowly. Read the words again. "We regret to inform you." He smiled, because regret had changed sides. The people who once told him no were now watching him on screens. The doors that slammed in his face were now left open, waiting for him to return. But he would not go back through them. He had built his own doors now, and his doors did not slam shut. They opened wide for those who had been told the same lies he once believed. He walked past a familiar diner. The smell of burnt coffee, the greasy scent of old fries. Nothing had changed. Except him. He used to wash dishes here, covered in sweat, ignored, invisible. Now the same cook who once barked orders at him peeked through the window, wide-eyed. Recognition dawned, not just of the face, but of the truth. The boy they had once overlooked had become the man they could not ignore. He nodded once, not out of anger, but out of peace, because he held no bitterness. He did not need revenge. He had something better. Victory. The rain began again, soft at first, then heavier, but he did not run. He welcomed it. Let it wash over him like a baptism, because this was not the rain that broke him. This was the rain that crowned him. He remembered a moment from years ago, lying on a mattress on the floor, staring at a cracked ceiling, wondering why life felt so heavy. He had no answers then, just questions. But he had kept moving, even when it felt like crawling through glass. His hands had bled, his feet had blistered, but he never stopped, because some part of him refused to die. Now that part had become his core, his strength, his fire, not born of ease, but of struggle, forged in silence, sharpened by suffering, and now unstoppable. He passed a bookstore. His name was on the window. He stopped and stared at it. Bold letters, bright display, right where everyone could see. It was not just a name. It was proof. Proof that someone who had been told he would never matter had become impossible to ignore. Inside, readers flipped pages of stories he once doubted he could even finish. Now those same stories inspired others to begin, to fight, to rise, to dream. And that was what this journey had become. More than just a personal war. More than just proving them wrong. It had become a beacon. For the quiet ones. For the broken ones. For the overlooked, the rejected, the nearly defeated. He walked again, past the lights, past the past, deeper into the heart of the city he once feared. Each footstep echoed like a drumbeat. A rhythm only warriors hear. A rhythm he had earned. A boy once invisible had become undeniable. Because he had done the one thing no one thought he could. He endured. When others quit, he stayed. When others broke, he bent. When others stopped, he crawled. And when no one believed in him, he built belief out of nothing. The night air was colder now, but he felt nothing but heat rising inside him. Not anger, not rage, but purpose. He passed a group of young boys sitting on the curb, hoods up, eyes down. He recognized their posture. He saw his old self in them. One of them looked up, just for a second. Their eyes met, and in that glance, the boy saw what was possible. Not because he was told, but because he saw someone who had lived it, felt it, survived it. He nodded again. No words, just fire passed from one soul to another. Because sometimes the greatest power is not shouting, but showing. He had become the proof. Not perfect, not untouchable, but powerful in his scars, radiant in his rawness. He turned another corner and stood at the foot of a tall building. His building, the headquarters of the dream they once mocked. Glass walls reflected the city lights, and inside, his team worked late, chasing the next milestone. He stood in silence for a moment, watching the lights flicker from inside. The same hands that once scrubbed floors now signed deals. The same mind that once questioned itself now led others. The same heart that once broke now beat louder than ever. He opened the door. Warm air wrapped around him. Colleagues looked up, smiled, nodded. Not because they feared him, but because they believed in him. Because he had earned it. Every single step, every scar, every victory. He walked past them with quiet strength, stepped into the elevator, and pressed the top floor. As the doors closed, he caught his reflection. He barely recognized the man staring back. Not because he had changed on the outside, but because he had become who he was always meant to be. Not the boy they doubted, not the man they rejected, but the legend they never saw coming. And tomorrow he would rise again. Not for them, not for revenge, but because that is who he was now. A force, a fire, a living storm, forever rising, forever proving them all wrong. He stepped onto the rooftop. The city stretched beneath him, wide, loud, and alive. Wind swept through his hair, cool against his skin. Above him, the sky had cleared. Stars blinked down like they had always known he would make it here. He stood still, breathing it all in. The silence, the weight, the freedom. This was not just the end of a journey. It was the beginning of something greater. Because now he knew. Every fall had a purpose. Every rejection had meaning. Every voice that tried to break him only made him louder. They had tried to define him, box him in, shut him out. But he had broken through. And now, he stood where they said he never would. Not to gloat, not to seek applause, but to become a lighthouse for those still lost in the dark. So let them talk. Let them doubt. Let them laugh. And when they do, smile, stand tall, and let your work speak. Because the best revenge is not anger, not rage, but elevation. Live so fully, so loudly, that their doubt becomes your echo, and your success becomes their silence. This is your time, your path, your fire. Rise, and prove them all wrong.